But when I was younger, at some point, I remember learning the concept that it is more blessed to give than to receive. Or another way to word that is, it's better to give than to take, right? It's better to give than to take. And I just have never really bought it. I don't believe it. I like stuff. And I don't care about gift giving as a concept, but I do like having things. And I like having nice things. And I like having things that other people don't have. It's quite fun. So when Paul quotes Jesus in Acts 20 and he says, it is more blessed to give than to receive, I think it just sounds like more religious talk. You know, it's nice, but who wants to give everything away instead of taking more for themselves? It's not natural. I don't really know exactly what it means. It's more blessed to give than to receive. It's better to give than to take. But I wonder if it could be true. So I need a volunteer. And because I didn't want to make a kid super nervous today and put him on the spot, I asked a kid, Kylie asked someone in advance for me, and I want to make sure he's in here. Is Cohen Evans in here? And if so, come on up here. All right, come on up here. Let's hear it for Cohen Evans. Oh, he's pumped. All right. I have two kinds of nerds clusters. Have any of you not had these yet? As a grown man, I had not eaten these before until the last year. My goodness, you're missing out. Like these, I'll be blunt. I don't care, bless you. I don't care about sugary candy. I'm more of like a dark chocolate person. Sweet tarts and Starburst and stuff like that, Skittles, none of it. I don't care. But these things, they're addicting. They're really, really good. So consider this my plug for Nerds Gummy Clusters. All right, YouTube, I expect royalties for that. Nerds Gummy Clusters. I have rainbow and I have very berry. Which one do you like best? Rainbow. Rainbow? Okay. Now wait here. You have two choices to make, okay? Well, you have one choice to make, two options. One, you can keep these and you can eat them, okay? They're yours, all right? I promise, they're yours. No pressure, no one cares. They saw me hand them to you, they're all yours. Second option, you choose someone else and you give them away. What would you like to do? You give them away? Of course you will. Okay. I should have picked a selfish kid. Okay. All right, Cohen. Please give them away. Pick someone who's never had them before. We have to win a new fan. Raise your hand if you never had them. Come on. Who wants this child's candy? Thanks, Cohen. These are for you. I threw those kind of hard, sorry. They felt lighter as I tossed them, and I thought, that's going way too fast. I'm so glad he caught that in his chest. Okay. That was going to be a new embarrassing moment in church. All right. You can eat those, okay? Thanks for sharing. All right, here's the deal. If he had said he was going to keep them, I had this fun little plan where I was going to make him stand here and eat them in front of you, which you can imagine, so I don't have to make him do it, right? He made the right choice. He did the selfless deed, and he gave them away, and he didn't know I was going to give him the other ones. Okay, here's the deal. If someone had to stand here and eat candy while all of you watched, would that feel comfortable? Not for anyone, right? It would be awkward for everybody. Something is strange about someone having access to things that no one else has access to and boasting in it and exaggerating how great they are. To be the person up front who has the nice thing seems like it would be satisfying. It seems exciting. I want to have stuff. I definitely want to have all the stuff. And I like having the stuff that you don't have. But once you put me on the spot, and it's obvious that I have it and you don't, I think somewhere written in the human heart, even the hearts that are kind of hardened and selfish, I think there is something inside of us put there by God that just knows we are not better than other people. That deep down, even though some of us are afraid to admit it, we know that we don't deserve anything that anyone else doesn't also deserve. That we're not better than anyone else. And because we're not better, we shouldn't have things that no one else gets to have. And so it makes us uncomfortable. When attention is drawn to that fact, there's something inside of us that feels that it is wrong. Somehow morally, I should not have this when no one else gets to have it. Okay, I believe that comes from God, who is giving rather than a taker. So, I want to talk about mountain climbing or hiking for just a second. How many of you have ever, oh my gosh, I didn't know that cord was up so high. Hang on. I pace a lot. This is dangerous. Okay. You wouldn't know I've done this at the same spot for like 11 years. I still trip over everything. I also still hit the wrong light switches. Who does that? Anybody at their own house hit the wrong switch sometimes? Yes, thank you. So I'm not completely nuts. Or we're all in this madhouse together. Okay, mountain climbing, hiking. How many of you have done it? Anybody? Raise your hands. You've climbed a steep trail. When I say hiking, I mean up the side of some kind of mountain. So not necessarily bouldering. I know most of you have never bouldered a cliff or something, but how many of you have hiked up to the top of a mountain somewhere? Okay, perfect. That's a lot of you. So I have some thoughts about it. I think there is a strange thing that happens when you're climbing up a mountain. You start at the bottom, you're full of energy, you packed your bag, you got your granola bars or your Cliff Bars or whatever, you've got your energy drink or at least a bottle of water, you've got a pocket knife and maybe a compass in case you get lost somewhere, and you're mentally prepared. Or if you're like me, you just show up and go for it because you're really irresponsible. But whatever you do, you go and you're pumped up for it, right? There's some adrenaline rush. You're excited to do this thing. You've planned it. You've marked out part of your day to go hike, and you've assumedly dressed for the weather and prepared. There's something exciting and exhilarating about it. I love being outside. So you get to the base of the mountain, you get to the trailhead, and you start, and you're making your ascent, right? You're paying attention. The higher you get, I feel like the adrenaline begins to wear off. 1.5 miles, 2 miles up these winding trails, you start to feel less of the burning excitement and more of the burning in your legs, right? And you start to slow down a little bit, and your steps are a little more calculated, and you notice that you're quicker to trip over rocks than you were at the beginning, and you're not hopping as much, you're more trudging. And you finally get to the top, and you get to see the views, and it's amazing. But the crazy thing about climbing, and this is especially true for actual rock climbing, like on cliff sides, that the most dangerous aspect of mountain climbing and hiking is descending from a height, not ascending to it. Even though we get tired on the way up and start to feel like we may not make it and start getting winded and the air is thin and all of that, it's actually the descent, the going back down, that is by far and away the most dangerous. It's statistically said over 80% of fatal mountain climbing accidents happen during the descent. So most people who die mountain climbing die falling on their way down, not on their way up. Why does that happen? I think, from experience, that it's pride. So I used to hike a lot when I was in college. We lived, 20 minutes from the Smoky Mountain National Park in Tennessee, so we used to go a lot. And we would do the Chimney Top Trails, which, if you've never been, it's this couple of mile-long trail that winds up the mountain. And then there's actually 3 peaks if you're willing to go over all 3, which my friends and I used to do in college. I don't know if I'd want to now. But in fact, I think it's all blocked off today. That it wouldn't stop me, but it should, right? You're not supposed to go over the yellow tape and chain link or whatever they put there. But we did. If it was there, we crossed it. And we went over all 3 chimney tops, and it was awesome. And we were high on life, and we're taking pictures and just having a good time, right? And then on the way down, we noticed that the ice that had kind of been packed in on the trail seemed way more slippery as you were descending than when you were going up. And then I felt bad for laughing at the elderly couple that had bit the dust on the way up the mountain earlier. All right, shouldn't have told you that part. Okay, so full disclosure. At the base of the mountain, like down in Gatlinburg area, minutes away, it was 65 degrees and sunny. It was a gorgeous day. So when we get to the top of these chimney top mountains and it's packed ice and snow on the trail, we're kind of shocked, right? We were wearing shorts. We were not prepared for that. So we grabbed sticks and we just kind of figure it out, and we're 20-year-olds. But there was a quite a bit older couple that were coming down from the chimney tops, and the woman slipped and bit the dust pretty hard, and her husband tried to catch her, and it made him fall too, and I wasn't a good person. I laughed. And then I immediately ran over and helped them. God's honest truth. Of course I helped them. But I did laugh a little bit because because I'm not a nice person. So you guys you're like, he's so mean, but you laugh at America's Funniest Home Videos and all that stuff too. We like people's pain. I don't know why. It's part of being a sinful human. So on the way down, God humbled me because I bit the dust like 2 different times and had like big wet dirt stains on my shorts from sliding in the snow on the trail. And my buddy TK, he was falling all over the place. He's already kind of awkward, and it was even worse when it was slippery. I understand now what happened. On the way up, we were so careful because we saw people slipping and falling, and we knew this is dangerous and it's getting steep. But once we got to the top, on our way down, it was kind of like, we did this. We made it. We're good. And that little bit of pride sneaks in, and we thought, it's fine. And so we just hurried down the trail and ended up falling 2 or 3 times. That's all it takes. Just a little bit of pride to ruin you. It turns out it wasn't reaching the top that proved anything about us. It was making it down safely from the top, and we did not do that very well. And I think that's been the story of many different aspects of my life since then. That I thought if I could make it to the top, I could prove something about myself. And it was, in fact, on the way down from the top that the real proof was in the pudding, that people could really see what kind of person I am, that I could see what kind of person I am. Paul, in Philippians 2, that's where we're at today if you want to flip to Philippians 2. He's been building this quiet revolution for the church in Philippi. And it's here in this second chapter that he lowers the boom in the softest possible way. He says, if you have any encouragement, if you listen or read the things that he says, you'll listen to me read them in a moment. But he's piling up his words like pillows, like a soft place for them to land, because I think he knows they're about to come down harder than they expect, that the descent is going to be unexpectedly difficult. So he's preparing them for a soft landing. He says, if any comfort, any participation in the Spirit, any affection, any sympathy. I don't think he's shouting these things. I think he's warmly inviting them. He's speaking to them in kindness and gentleness. He's a good rabbi. Paul's a good rabbi. I know kids are in here. A rabbi is the Jewish term for a teacher or a preacher. So he's kind of like what I do here. He's teaching people in churches and trying to instruct them how to love God and how to love their neighbors and how to live in a way that's wholesome and good and makes the world better. And like a good rabbi, he's leading them, frankly, to dangerous places because God calls us into difficult and dangerous places. But he's doing it in a way that they can agree with. He's doing it in a way that makes sense to them. He says, of course you have all these things. He's comforting them. He's preparing them. Of course you've tasted the grace of Christ. Now you have to let that show. It has to become real. So I want to break the chapter up into 3 sections for today. Verses 1 through 4 is where we're going to begin. Philippians 2, 1 through 4. And this section I'm going to call the subversion of self-emptying. The subversion of self-emptying, which is a fancy way of saying that emptying yourself is actually a subversive tactic. That's still saying the same thing. How can I simplify that? It's a tricky way to actually gain power over your life and be able to do what is right. We think by getting more, we're going to have power over our lives and be able to do what we want to do. But it's actually in giving ourselves away that we gain real power and freedom, and we can actually do the right thing. Maybe that's a better way to put it. We'll see what Paul says. He'll say it much better than me. Chapter 2, verses 1 through 4. If there's any encouragement in Christ, any incentive of love, any participation in the Spirit, any affection or sympathy, complete my joy by being of the same mind, having the same love, being in full accord and of one mind. Do nothing from selfishness or conceit, but in humility count others better than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his or her own interest, but also to the interest of others. Self-emptying love. It's here that Paul begins to dismantle the cultural air that they breathe in Philippi. And it's frankly quite similar to what we breathe here in modern America. It's hard to admit that we're all part of the system, but it is true that we are part of a system that values power and prestige and status and popularity and stuff, right? It's the way of the world, and we all participate, even when we don't want to. These believers lived in ancient Philippi, a Roman colony. I told you last week it was settled by a lot of retired military soldiers from Rome. They were very loyal to Caesar, and they were proud Romans. Honor was currency for them. Honor was everything. Shame was your destruction, your ruin. Status was everything. The Roman world was built on glory ascent, getting to the top of the mountain, being the best and the greatest. More wealth, more power, more influence, more Caesar, right? Be more like Caesar. To climb was to win. To fall down would be to lose, possibly to lose your life. Paul is writing then what I'll call a counter liturgy, a different way of seeing the world and living, a different way. He whispers, don't climb, descend. Don't grasp, release. Don't take advantage, but consider others as greater than yourselves. This isn't passive resignation. Paul's not saying resign yourselves to just being blah, right? He's not saying don't care anymore. It's not apathy. It's quite the opposite. It requires more effort. He's saying try even harder to not do what everyone else is doing and instead to love the people around you in humility. Give instead of taking. Care more. Love more. Serve more. And in this way, yeah, you won't look more like Caesar, but you will look a lot more like Jesus. And Jesus is, of course, greater than Caesar. This is active, intentional surrender. Barbara Brown Taylor says that humility, this is one of my favorite quotes, humility is the virtue that allows us to breathe the same air as all the rest of creation. I'll say it again because I think it's really good. Humility is the virtue that allows us to breathe the same air as all the rest of creation. It levels the playing field. It reminds you that you are not better than anyone or anything else, that you are part of the beauty of what God has made, and it's all important to God. Humility is so good, so healthy. And so it's in that humble position, after Paul emphasizes that we should remain humble and think of others, that he then goes into verses 5 through 11. This is the second section I want to talk about, and it's the hymn that rewrites everything for the early church. If you're not aware, this is a hymn, what we're about to read, at least a portion of it. So this was an ancient song that they would have sung in the churches. We'll read it now. Have this mind among yourselves, which was in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but he emptied himself, taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of humanity, and being found in human form, he humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on a cross. Therefore, God has highly exalted him and bestowed on him the name that is above every other name, so that at the name of Jesus, every knee should bow, in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God our Father. Amen. Paul gives here what most scholars would agree is the oldest recorded hymn of the Christian church. This was written almost certainly before any of the gospel records. So before Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, or any of the false gospels or pseudepigraphal gospels. Pseudepigraphal means falsely authored or falsely attributed. There are a lot of gospels that aren't in your Bible. Some of them are maybe more accurate than others, but the four that everyone agreed were accurate and faithful, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, those were all written after this song. Churches were already singing this hymn long before they wrote any of the stories of Jesus on papyrus. Papyri in plural, right? You don't care. It's amazing to me. It's truly amazing to me that we have access to a hymn that's 2,000 years old. And that the thing that the early church wanted to focus on when they sang about Jesus was his self-emptying love. That he gave up what could have been his in order to share something with you. That's what they wanted to know about Jesus. That's what they wanted people to know. It's what they wanted to sing about. It's what they felt like writing songs about. That Jesus, who could have had anything, gave all of that up to have you, to be with you. That's an incredible thought. Though he was in the form of God, He didn't count equality with God a thing to be grasped. The word grasped there is one of those really important Greek words in the New Testament. Harpagmos, it's got a sound at the beginning. It's spelled like arpagmos. It doesn't matter. Harpagmos is the word for grabbing or clinging onto or tightening onto or even like clutching. So you could translate it any of those ways. But what's cool about this word is it's the same word in the Septuagint. The Septuagint is the Greek Old Testament, which is the oldest record we have of the Old Testament in Greek, not in Hebrew, ironically. But in the Greek Septuagint, when Adam seizes the forbidden fruit in the Garden of Eden, it says he harpagmos, he seizes it. That same verb, to seize, to grab. Paul takes that imagery of grabbing something that could be ours but really doesn't need to be or doesn't have to be, and he says Jesus didn't grab. He could have had it, and he said no. He did not grab onto it. That's the difference. Humanity ever since has tried to snatch or cling to or grab onto something that isn't ours to grab. And it never satisfies the way we hope. And Jesus says it doesn't have to be this way. Instead of grabbing and taking, you could just give. You could learn to give, to let go. But that's hard. John Bear would remind us here, Jesus didn't become less God when he took on the form of humanity. He shows us who God has always been in the form of humanity. Richard Rohr says, God isn't what we thought. He's so much better. So much better. The God incarnate that we see in Jesus, when God puts on humanity, is a God that any sane person would love to follow. One who gives of himself in love. He goes down lower and lower and lower into this world, to the pits of suffering and even death. There's a word for that. I'm going to teach it to you. Kenosis. Kenosis. Not just Keno, although they do play that at some churches, I think. But this is kenosis. I'm so stupid. I have the weirdest sense of humor. Thank you for the pity laughs. Okay, kenosis. Kenosis. It is this really remarkable concept in ancient theology that carries forward, I think, today. And it's the idea of giving up or emptying oneself. It's basically the fancy way of saying Jesus gave up all the power and prestige of heaven in order to suffer with you in this world. And the word for that is kenosis. We would say the incarnation is an example of kenosis. It's God choosing to give things away in order to share them with you. I think it's one of the most important words in all of church history. God empties himself into his humanity. He's not subtracting God from a person. He's adding humanity to God. That's wild. So in the earliest churches, we say Jesus, in the first creeds of the church, Jesus was truly God and truly human. Now, when kids ask you, how is he God and man or God and human? And you say, well, he's like half one and half the other. But he's not, right? You can't speak of it that way. You can't say he's fully God and fully human, which I know many of you grew up saying that. Well, Jesus is fully God and fully human. Fully is a bad word because fully means full or empty, right? It's a volume of something. He's full of this or he's full of that. But that's not the right word. It's ontological. It's being itself. He is truly God and yet truly human. He is all power and all glory, and yet he sits it aside and puts on suffering and flesh. It is a mystery. It's one of those beautiful mysteries in the church. Kenosis. Jesus didn't get rid of being God. He added weakness and vulnerability. He didn't let go of godness, but he grabbed onto something different. Instead of snatching to the power and prestige, he grabbed onto something beneath him and lowered himself to that level. Humility doesn't mean self-deprecation. I want to just pause and make that comment. I added it in my notes this morning because I think it's important. Some of you have been told over and over that Jesus humbled himself and you need to humble yourself, and people have abused you by using that kind of terminology and encouraged you to become a doormat to other people. That's not what Jesus was. He was mistreated often, but only when he chose to be. Only when he knew it could somehow bring greater good and he was man enough to take it. But he never says you need to just lay down and take a beating. He doesn't tell you to just let people walk all over you. What he does say is that when people mistreat you, God will use it. God can and will use it to bring good. And that the more mistreatment, the more blessing is in store for you. And he says a lot more about it, but that would be another sermon for another time. I just want to suffice to say, I'm not encouraging you to belittle and deprecate yourselves, right? I don't want you to put yourselves down and be denigrating yourselves. That's not what being a Christian is. That's guilt-ridden religiosity. You don't need that. You don't need more guilt and shame. But what you do need is humility. Being humble means I know I am not better than anyone else. Being guilty means I know I'm so much worse than everybody else, right? I don't want you to feel guilt. You're not worse than everybody else, but you aren't any better than anybody else. I hope you understand both of those things are true. So you don't need to leave here with new guilt, but you also should leave here humbled. I really hope that made sense. If you need to talk more about that, please let me know. I would love to talk about it. Okay, so the fullness of God has stooped down low enough to wash dirty feet, right? The creator of the universe has to take naps when he's sick, has diarrhea and vomiting, I assume. I don't know how Jesus could have lived 30 some odd years and not ever vomited or had diarrhea, right? He experiences the pangs of life, the stuff that nobody wants to talk about, right? Have you ever thought of that? Jesus vomiting? Hunched over somewhere? I mean, there wouldn't have been toilets, but wherever they threw up, right? Probably in the woods. But I could picture him hunched over and friends patting him on the back and holding his hair because he probably had really long hair. It's not funny. I'm not laughing at his misery. I'm laughing at the thought that Jesus was really human because most of us don't take time to even consider it. That he suffered, that he really felt pain. It wasn't just the cross. He lived a whole human life with real human people, just like you. The author of all of this became a character in his own story. It's wild. It's absolutely wild. Some have called it the great humiliation of God, and simultaneously, the greatest revelation of God. The divine takes on flesh. He puts on servanthood. He takes on death. Kids are so cute. He takes on a cross, the instrument of state humiliation and execution. So then, after all of that, Paul says, look at all the stuff Jesus went through. He says, and then, therefore, because of this, anytime there's a therefore, I remember an old Baptist preacher said, whenever there's a therefore, you better ask what it's there for. So I'm teaching you that now. Therefore, meaning because he did all this stuff, therefore God has highly exalted him, so that at his name every knee will bow everywhere that you can imagine. Above, within, below, everywhere. So Paul says the way up, ironically, is the way down. The way up is the way down. And that's where we often get trapped. And I'm glad kids are in here for this because I'm trying to shake some stuff up here for you. Have fun at lunch later talking about this with your kids. The old language of geography in the church needs to be gone away, right? It needs to be done away with. We say hell is down below and heaven is up above, but Paul's hymn doesn't say that. It doesn't mean that at all. It's not like Jesus descended into some physical basement of this universe, right? He's speaking of self-emptying, stepping into the deepest places of human suffering, into the full weight of sinful estrangement from God. It's not about spatial directions. It's about cosmic solidarity. The above and below is a reference to the nature of God being so much above us and the nature of humanity being so lowly. But it has nothing to do with actual directions. So if you still think God is up on the clouds and hell is under your feet, that's, first of all, it's goofy, right? It's goofy. But secondly, it's not helpful because God doesn't exist here at all. He is in a plane beyond this place. He's everywhere. I mean, he does exist here, but not the way you imagine. He's not some grandpa sitting somewhere, right? God is everywhere. God is being itself. And if we can't wrap our minds around that, then we're going to continue to see God in all the wrong ways. If your God is still some just gigantic grandfather in the sky who really loves you, that's a good start, but it's not even close, right? God is love itself. that embeds and imbues everything meaningful in all of existence. God exists beyond existence. God is existence. We call it the aseity of the divine. He just is because he is, and he always has been. Our little pea brains can't understand that concept, but we can at least pretend to and be in awe of it. So teach your kids that. Don't tell them, yeah, hell's down there and it's real hot, and heaven's up there and there's lots of rainbows and unicorns. Instead, teach them that God is everywhere all the time with them, and that God is the force of love and justice in this world. Teach them to believe that, and not to be afraid of, I don't know what. Just not to be afraid, frankly. God did say that more than anything else in the whole Bible. Don't be afraid. I'm preaching to myself because I feel like I'm regularly trying to make my kids afraid of me. So it doesn't work. They're in here right now. I can tell you it doesn't work. David prayed once, if I make my bed in Sheol, you're there. Sheol's the Hebrew word for the pit or the grave, the place of death down below where they bury bodies. He says, even if I were to make my bed in the grave, if I die and go down in there, you're going to be there. David understood God isn't like in one floor of the apartment complex and we're down here in this other floor and then hell's down here below. David understood wherever it is, God is in all of it, right? God is everywhere. This isn't new age stuff. This is biblical. God exists on a plane we can't even comprehend, beyond up and down. So, again, the reason this matters is because when Jesus descends, Paul isn't saying he literally went from up on the clouds to being down on the planet Earth. That is a really narrow, short-sighted view. What he says is God went from being God with everything you could imagine at his disposal to being human like you with limitations and suffering. That's the way down. It's not physically, spatially down. It is down in being itself, giving up what could have been his. The scandal of particularity is what we call it in theology. But to keep it simple, it's humility. It's choosing to be less than what you could be in order to love well. God stoops into humanity, and not just into all of humanity. He stoops down into your story in particular because he loves you. And that leads to the final verses 12 through 18. Then we're done. These kids are more restless than I am. That's saying something. Therefore, my beloved, as you've always obeyed, so now, not only as in my presence, but much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, for God is at work in you, both to will and to work for his good pleasure. Do everything, do all the things without grumbling or questioning or complaining, so that you may be blameless and innocent, children of God, without blemish, in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world, holding fast the word of life, so that in the day of Christ I may be proud that I didn't run in vain or labor in vain, even if I'm to be poured out as a drink offering on the sacrifice of your faith. I'm glad, and I will rejoice with all of you. And you should also be glad, and you should rejoice with me. We'll stop there. Paul doesn't leave this as some mere theology project, right? I love that stuff. I've talked about it for the last 15 minutes. It's great. Who God is and what God has done. And I hope you believe all the things that we've talked about. But why does any of it matter if the rubber doesn't meet the road, right? If it doesn't do anything? Good theology makes good praxis. If you believe it, you should do it. And so Paul says, yeah, we get all this stuff about God, but what does it mean for you? And he says, quit bickering and be at peace and care about each other more and try a little harder to do good for each other. Just let go of control. This should change you. Work out your salvation with fear and trembling, not because you're earning your salvation, but because this kind of love is overwhelming if you really appreciate it for what it is. It shakes you. It unnerves you. It forces you to open up your clenched fists that you didn't even realize were held so tightly. And then that small, almost absurd phrase, he says, do everything, do all the things, literally, do all the things without grumbling or complaining. Feels like a joke almost. Do all the things without grumbling or complaining. I barely do anything without grumbling or complaining. And I wish I were kidding. So I'll find a reason to be annoyed by things almost every day. Multiple times a day, probably. Do all the things without grumbling or complaining. Like after singing this beautiful hymn about God's cosmic descent in Christ, Paul says, oh yeah, and stop bickering and try to get along better. Because real humility isn't just in the big grand gestures. It's not abstract. It's choosing silence instead of defending yourself. It's choosing patience instead of trying to prove your point. It's choosing a towel and a basin instead of the throne. And Paul says, if you start to do that, if you can start to make those choices, then you will shine like lights in the night sky. In a world that is so perverted and twisted and confused, in a world full of darkness, where people just take more and more and more from each other, if you could learn to really just give yourself away, you will shine the light of God. The downward path of Jesus looks like the most beautiful stars on a clear, dark night sky, just bursting with gorgeous light. And Paul says that could be your life in this world. What if we made that our reality? Maybe that's why mountain climbers trying to descend a mountain have to really calculate the risks. Would you stand with me as we close, and would the band come back up? Because once you've seen the top, once you've made it to the peak of the mountain, pride does sneak its way in on your journey down. And you start to think you are higher up and better than the people around you. You could be deceived into thinking that you deserve more than they do. It's easier than you think. We all want to ascend. We all want to be at the top. We all want more. And we imagine, I think we grow up imagining God up there in the heights, and we got to climb our way up to reach him. And Paul says, it's never been that way at all. If there's one thing I know about God, it's that he's down low in the most lowly place you can imagine. You want to find God in the Bible? You find him in feeding troughs in stables behind inns that are too full. You find him in the arms of a teenage mother whose family has essentially ostracized her at that point. You find God wandering around with crooks and cheats and extorters and eventually murderers and insurrectionists. You find God in towns that other people won't even walk through, talking to people that no one else talks to. You find God kneeling on the floor, washing dirt from between the toes of his traitorous friends. If you want to see God, you don't have to go up somewhere to find him. He already came down to you. In fact, it may be that you have to go lower still.